To the CDC, the average woman in the United States stands 63.5 inches tall, or 5'3.5". According to the U.S. Census Bureau, she has a median income of $45,000 and an average income of $61,000. I also looked at the average male. His average salary was $84,000. His median salary was $60,000. Y'all then asked me to break that out by average single male versus average married male, with the average single male earning $48,000, standing 5'9.7 inches tall, with an average salary of $68,000. Y'all were correct that the average male did have a higher income at a median income of $60,000 a year. His salary peaked around $86,000 to $90,000 a year, depending on which study you looked at, but pretty consistently around ages 47 to ages 55. And I found no data to indicate that taller men were more likely to be married. So the average man standing 5'9.7 inches tall. However, I did find several studies that pointed out that while taller men married earlier, because shorter men married later, or because when people marry later in life in general, those marriages tend to last longer. In fact, shorter men had a 32% less likely chance of getting divorced. For those of you interested, for the rest of this video, I'll cover average height and weight of women in the United States, average income by gender in the United States, and average relationship status in the United States as of 2025. As always, all of these are timestamped below, so you can jump to your favorite chapter or your chapter of interest. Average height and weight in the United States is readily available on the CDC's website, which I'll link to this study and all studies in the video description below, showing that men stand 69 inches tall on average and weigh about 200 pounds. I saw an updated study that granted y'all another quarter inch, so the study showed that men stand 5.97 inches in the United States, and that ranks them 47th globally. I'll link to a table for each state later in this video. Women, according to the CDC, stand 63.5 inches tall with an average weight of 170 pounds. There's also a detailed report by age that you can click when you visit this website, and click this link here. It'll bring you to this PDF. For average weight and height in the United States, you can download this PDF. I did 2 other videos on the average single male and the average married male, so this video will focus on the average woman in the United States. For that information, you can scroll to table 4. If you scroll to table 4, you can see a breakdown of average weight in the United States by age, race, and ethnicity. If you scroll to table 10, you can also see a breakdown of heights in inches. They also have centimeters as well for age and ethnicity. At 5'4.8 inches tall, your tallest women in the United States are located in Oregon. There's then a 5-way tie at 5'4.7 inches tall in Idaho, Minnesota, Montana, South Dakota, and Utah. Based on those data tables, I filled out this map for you for a comparison across the United States for the average height of women across the United States. Because I already had the data, I also went ahead and mapped the tallest men across the United States. The tallest men are located in Alabama, Montana, South Dakota, Tennessee, and Utah, with a tie at 5'10.6 inches tall. And this was the data that I found earlier that I referred to, showing that men in the United States stand 5.97 inches tall, and that ranks them 47th globally. For ease of state by state comparison, I then mapped both genders in this data table. You can find your state for the average height of men and women in your state or across the United States. From my video on the average male across the United States, which you can find linked below, there were several questions around, do taller men make more money? There's not an exact science to this, but there is some correlation showing that taller men have higher incomes, but more importantly, that's because they're overrepresented in positions of power. So for example, while there's just 15% of men over 6 feet tall in the United States, I think it's 14.8% to be exact, there's over 50% of men in C-suites in Fortune 500 companies that are 6 feet or taller. So obviously, if they're in higher paying positions, they are making more money, which may or may not be correlated to the fact that they are taller men. I'll follow up on some more data for that and do a whole video. For those interested in average height around the globe, I also found this recent study from Visual Capitalist that looked at the tallest men in the world, or the top 20 countries to be exact, finding that the tallest men are staying in the Netherlands at a little over 6 feet tall. Now, perhaps the most frequent comment I saw on both my videos about the average single male and the average married male was hypergamy. Put simply, as defined here, women try to marry up. I will point out here that if true, some of this is men's fault because by and large, men date younger women, so you would expect them to attempt to date up. Or, I put another way, they are approaching younger women, therefore they're already dating up. So it's a circular argument that women try to date up when older men are dating down. Here's the study from Psychology
Specifically,
Today. As I highlighted here, both men and women prefer to date younger partners as they get older. However, the younger partner gap is more pronounced among men. You can see the age gap that men prefer in relationships here. You can see the age gap that women prefer in relationships here. Because it was more pronounced among men, I mapped it for you in this infographic here. Now, a couple other interesting things to note here is a study from Pew Research Center around Valentine's Day found that there are twice as many young men, which they defined as under age 29, no offense to those of you over age 30, that are twice as many are single than women at about 60% compared to 30% of young women are those under age 30. Once again, no offense to those of you over age 30. This is not my study. But what's interesting there is that a separate study found that half of these same young men had never approached women in real life. Now, that is partially explained by the fact that they don't have to. A study from Stanford University found that in 2017, about 39% of couples met online. When that was forecasted out by somebody on Reddit who created this graphic or extended that graphic, they estimated that by 2025, about 50% of relationships will first start online. Now that's interesting because even when young women were asked, they actually don't mind being approached by men, I assume, when they are approached respectfully, no matter how difficult or easy that might be for men. The reason men don't approach women was either a fear of doing so, a fear of being rejected, or a fear of being exposed or recorded and rejected. So there's potentially two takeaways that you could have here. It is more difficult to approach women in real life, even though half of men are refusing to do so. Interestingly enough, of those 60% of single men, the number one reason they said they are single is because they want to. So they are saying that they are making the choice not to approach these women in real life or otherwise. Although it didn't say whether they were not approaching women at all, it did say that they were not approaching women in real life. But because 50% of couples start online, perhaps those men are choosing to approach women online exclusively. For those of you interested in the data behind those studies, I'll link to all three in the video description below, but here's the ones that I'm going to point out. That first study looking at 45% of men have never approached a woman in real life. Young men under ages of 30, no offense to those over age 30. You can find that at datepsychology.com and their risk aversion study. And here in the conclusion is where I point out that most men who do not approach women cited that they were afraid to do so, or at least that's why they don't approach women in real life. As you can see highlighted here in blue, young men were less likely to approach women. They also just didn't take risk in general. And he found, however, that men who do approach women respectfully in real life are still successful when doing so, statistically. For those of you who still might be interested in approaching women in real life or asking a woman out however you go about doing so in real life or online, you might be interested in this follow-up study from Date Psychology about the most and least attractive male hobbies. Here are your 15 most attractive male hobbies. Here are your 15 least attractive hobbies. And for those of you interested in date ideas, you might want to check out this study from YouGov that found that both men and women don't go on as many dates as they would like. Here they compared how many dates Americans want to go on versus how many dates they actually go on. To be fair, they did find that women had gone on more terrible dates, or dates they would describe as terrible, than men. However, when we refer back to our previous study and that half of young men had never approached a woman in real life, it might be possible that women are going on more dates. So statistically, they have an opportunity to have more worse dates, given that they have more dates in general. Given that in the Western population anyway, our Western culture, it is generally the men who are responsible for doing the approaching or initiating the date. And finally, for those of you looking for date ideas or non-terrible dates, here's a chart listing the dates that people wish they went on versus the dates they've actually gone on. So you can take somebody on one of these dates that they've wished they've gone on, statistically speaking, and you would have a greater odds of not being a first terrible date. If you jump to this chapter of the video, I'll quickly recap. The average woman is 63.5 inches or 5'3.5" inches tall in the United States with a median income of $45,000 and an average income of $61,000. You might reasonably ask why I talk about money so much on this channel, besides the fact that I enjoy it and have actually been doing so for the last 20 years of my life as an internal auditor. I've been talking about money online since before it was popular, and I'll be talking about money online when it's no longer popular again. But as you can see here, Gen Z is even more hyper-focused on money than myself, with many of them saying that they need an income of over $500,000 to be successful. You can see that that is greater than any generation reflected here. And overall, on average, Americans think they need $270,000 gross income before tax, because y'all always ask me that, to be successful in the United States. That survey comes from Empower, but survey or not, they might not be that far off if you were inundated like they are with podcasts and information like these.
Okay, so the 666 rule is that men have to make six figures, be over 6 feet tall, and have a 6-inch peep.
What do you think the average guy makes in the United States?
Maybe probably like 80K.
Wow.
400,000?
Average male, 70,000.
$37,000 a year.
You want his income to be? I feel like this is gonna sound bad. I feel like 300,000.
I would have to say 127. Probably 150 to $250,000 a year.
$500,000? Is that bad?
150, maybe to 250,000 a year would be comfortable for sure.
I was just having this conversation with my friend, and she was like, you have to manifest a husband, girl. Ideally, my husband needs to be making like 650,000.
Oh my God, are you serious? What are your thoughts on girls who will only date men who are 6 feet tall, make six figures, and are 6 inches? I would assume you're referring to the size. Hey, you need to have standards in your life, and they are important. That being said, I do think not a lot of people understand how small of the population that is.
Now, how does that compare to how much the average man and woman make in the United States? The average income for single people in the United States, according to this study from Self Financial, is $56,000. Single women living alone earn an income of about $50,000. Overall, renters have an income, I wasn't able to get the data by gender, of about $60,000, while single males have an income of $61,000. You'll see that these are a little bit higher because Self Financial did look at averages, whereas married couples earn an average of $146,000 a year. For those of you interested in the median for those figures, you can visit this website here for the Self Financial table, and you can download it from the U.S. Census Bureau, and it'll give you both average and median. However, with your overall averages, regardless of gender, I put it together for this infographic here. You can find median salary, average salary, top 10%, and top 1% by age. An independent study by PayScale found that women's earnings peak around age 44 with earnings of $66,000, whereas men's earnings peak around age 55 with earnings of $101,000. In a prior video, y'all asked me to break out single men's earnings versus married men, and yes, I did find, as well as this study from the federal government, in which the U.S. Federal Reserve did 2 studies over the years, finding that married men's earnings peak around somewhere between $86,000 to $90,000, and those earnings peaked in their study around age 47. Or to give us a range between PayScale and the study from the U.S. Federal Reserve, it would have been a range of between ages 44 and 55, with those earnings peaking around $90,000, which was consistent across both studies. This study from CBS News found that married men's earnings peaked around age 47, nearing $90,000, and between ages 47 and retirement, they made over $30,000 a year, which means they had almost $1 million more in gross total career income than single men and single women, shown here in these lines below. For those of you interested, I have a video completely dedicated to the data behind average married men, which you can find here and linked below in the video description. Across the United States, both men and women are marrying later in life, with men marrying at about 31 and women marrying about an average age of 28. However, for both men and women, average marriage and divorce rates are down across the United States. Both are also having less children. In fact, in 1993, as you might have noticed, about 60% of households would have had at least one child by age 30. Now, in 2023, as of this study, or for those of you in 2025, about 75% of your friends don't have children, even though they are in their mid-30s or older, or by the time they reach their mid-30s, they will not have had children. Last year, 1/4 of adults over age 40 having never married, which was a new record high in the United States. So overall, people are marrying less and having less children. One result of that is that single women actually own more homes than married men. Every time I post an infographic or stat like this, men say this is due to divorce, and there is no study proving that to be true. In fact, this most recent viral study explicitly says that is untrue. From Singletree showing that single women own more homes than single men has actually been something that they found as early as 2018, and the gap continues to grow. Here they show the states with the largest share of single women homeowners. Here they share the states with the largest share of single men homeowners. If anyone bothered to read the study, they would see that it explicitly states that divorce is not the reason or the leading cause for single women owning more homes. And in fact, in the comments that I got, men admitted that buying a home is not a priority to them. And the study did find that buying a home is a priority for women, and that single women prioritize home ownership more than single men. Also finding that women are pursuing and attaining more college degrees than men. This has been happening over the last 20 years, and there are more women than men enrolled in college, so we expect that this will continue to grow, at least in the immediate or near future. While married women did make more than single women, there wasn't a statistical difference, so I didn't map that here. Instead, I jumped to average household income. The median gross average household income before tax is $80,000 as of 2025. The average household income is $114,000. And here's a breakdown of household income by age of head of household. The U.S. Department of Justice also drops this for median household income for individuals from a household of 1 to up to 4, and they have a calculation on the website, which you can find at the link here if you need to calculate for households with more than 4 individuals. While single women may own more homes than single men, by and large, couples and investors still dominate the household landscape, and in fact, most are being priced out of the household ownership, with the oldest individual or oldest on record now, with the first-time home buyer needing a household income, according to U.S. Census data, of $97,000 or nearly over $100,000 in some cities and states, and the first-time home buyer is a median age of 38 years old. Using Pew Research definition of the middle class, which I've mapped for you here, which is 2/3 to 2 times median household income, you can see how the middle class is being priced out of the ability to buy homes in the United States. To wrap, because it's asked in the comments of every video, I also included average household net worth here, and this does include primary residence. For ease of reference, so you don't have to scroll back to the beginning of the video, the average single male has a median income of $48,000 and average income of $68,000, standing 5'9.7" inches tall. There was no statistical difference that I was able to find for married men, although the data did show that taller men marry sooner, shorter men tend to stay married longer. Therefore, across all marriages, the average married male is still 5'9.7" inches tall. His median salary is around $60,000, with his salary peaking between ages 47 and 55 at around $90,000 a year. The average woman is 63.5 inches tall, or 5'3.5", with a median salary of $45,000, and her average salary is around $62,000 a year. Thanks for subscribing.